All right, hi there, everyone. Welcome to Believe in Bills on this Wednesday. Adam Benini, WGRZ TV, and as usual, Sal Mayorana, Rochester Democrat and Chronicle from the field house after what was actually a walkthrough today. Sal, how you doing?
I'm good. Why does it feel like I haven't talked to you forever when we go Sunday to Wednesday, man? I just miss you so much that
that warms my heart to hear it, really. But it
feels like we've gone so long without talking.
Well, there's a lot of ground to cover here, right? Because what we weren't aware of when we did our post-game show following the win over the Dolphins was the situation with Keon Coleman, right? And the hand wrist. He did not take part in the walkthrough today. I will get to Amari Cooper and Christian Benford here in a minute. But this Coleman thing, I'm no doctor, but I don't like the way this thing is vibing right now.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell. You couldn't tell much on Monday from McDermott on the Zoom call. But today, live in the press room, I got a real sense that this is not looking good for Coleman, certainly for this week. I highly doubt he's playing this week, and the level of subterfuge that McDermott is putting out there is making me believe that this might end up being an IR situation. Now he won't go that far yet. They've already made the moves on Carter and Smoot and really didn't hesitate too much on those. Put them on IR. They had to get surgery. So I'm not quite sure what the difference is on Coleman. I guess we can hope that maybe it's not quite as serious and they're really trying to extend it as long as they can before they have to make a decision. But it just didn't feel like it's trending in a good spot for Keon Coleman. So I would expect that he probably won't play. Now, on the flip side, on Amari Cooper, it was interesting, Adam. McDermott seemed to indicate that that's more of a day-to-day situation, and we'll see as the week goes out. We just spoke to Allen, though, and Allen kind of put out there, he's coming along. He's learning the playbook. If we can get him back out there this week, great. If not, next. And right away, my mind's thinking, well, wait a minute. Maybe Josh already knows that Cooper can't go because that was something you wouldn't normally hear him say that. I don't know if he just slipped or maybe it means nothing. Maybe he truly will be out there this week. But I don't know, man. If they don't have those two guys, It's not like the Colts are some great team, but that's two big players. It was one thing not to have Cooper last week, but now to have Cooper and Coleman possibly, that's a blow for the Bills.
I would get into the passing game with you in just a second here. What about Christian Benford?
And Benford, he seemed like he was okay in the locker room. I just walked over there, and I heard. So I wasn't going to talk to him today, but I heard someone ask him, and he says, "Yeah, I'm straight." So they all say that. They all say they're straight on Wednesday. We'll see when game time comes. But look, both, McDermott said last week that Cooper and Benford were kind of in that 50-50 range to play or not, and they chose to be safe and sat them both out. So I guess on Benford, I'm feeling a little bit more confident that he'll get back out there. And then again, Cooper, it's hard to read right now because I was getting two different signals from McDermott and Allen. So we'll have to wait till Friday to see what McDermott says when the last injury report comes out.
Well, you used the key word subterfuge. And after years of doing this, I think that we've learned to – sometimes you have to read between the lines a little bit. So to hear Josh Allen say that, and I think your reaction to it is spot on, at least it gives you a window in terms of the potential time frame, right? And as far as this the deal with Coleman – the level of evaluation that's going on here, the amount of time it's taking, that sort of thing, that's the red flag to me on that. And like I said, I'm no doctor, but wrists are tricky. There's a lot going on in there. And if they're still trying to figure this out or gauge it or whatever, I do think it's fair to read into that and have an obvious level of concern.
Absolutely, Adam. I mean, you're right. The Bills are always tricky when it comes to injuries, right? We never really get a sense of what's going on. I can't read it. I can't read it this week exactly who's going to be available. So we're going to have to just wait and see.
All right, quick word from the sponsor here. BetOnline is the world's most trusted platform and your number one source for everything football. Head to the website today to get in on the action. BetOnline, the game starts here. So what we can talk about and project on, Sal, is impact to the passing game with either of those two guys, Cooper or Coleman, or one of the two of them out, right? And I think with Cooper out this past week against Miami, it was pretty obvious to me that things kind of reverted back to the pre-Amari Cooper trade version of this receiving core, in the sense that Miami, and Josh Allen said it in the postgame, was able to keep everything in front of them and forced more precision on Allen's part. And they got things figured out, obviously, as the game went on with the 3 second-half touchdowns. But now you take Keon Coleman out of the mix in combination with Cooper or independent of that. And Coleman had done so much to develop and shown so much growth and impact in his rookie year in recent weeks. That one hurts.
Yeah. I mean, he was starting to play a little bit better. He had the bad drop last week, which, resulted in the pick, took away 7 points. So that wasn't good, but he bounced back later in the game, made a nice 20. His only catch was a 21-yarder, and then he caught the 2-point conversion, which was a nice play by him. I mean, that was a rookie, down in the goal line situation there, trying to find an opening because Allen was looking, and Keon ended up being the guy. So that was nice. It was good to see the progress. But, there still is the inconsistency in his game. He did not a whole lot to draw that penalty on Poyer, right? I mean, I thought it was a terrible decision to throw the ball downfield like that, and it ended up being gold because of what Poyer did. But look, Keon, if he doesn't play, he is certainly an emerging player, and they will miss him. And they better hope they get Cooper back. It's interesting to me, Adam, last week, the Dolphins, the way they played it, they dared the Bills to actually go to their strengths, right? I mean, and here's where I'm going with this. They took all the deep stuff away and kept everything in front of them. Well, that's great, but when you think about it, the Bills can't go deep anyways, right? Everything is in front of them. So they were allowing the Bills to complete those short, quick passes to Khalil Shakir. They were allowing Kincaid to get open underneath. The running backs were getting open underneath. You realize that 80% of Allen's yardage last week was yards after catch? He had I'm not into all these metrics and everything else, but I did hear someone say his average depth of target was like 3-point-something yards per attempt, one of the smallest of his career. And you saw it. Everything was that short, quick stuff because Miami made them do it. And I'm thinking to myself, now that on retrospect, as I watched the game back again and watched it all unfold, like, why the hell would Miami have done that? That's actually Buffalo's strength, is to throw if they're going to give you the short stuff, that's what the Bills do best right now, is throw the ball short. We just talked to Allen. I asked him about Miami's approach. And he said, yeah, and we're probably going to see the same thing against the Colts because the Colts defense plays very similarly. They don't want anything deep, which I guess you could say that about a lot of teams today, Adam. A lot of teams play this way now, where they play the too high and they want to take away the explosives. But by the way I look at it, that's Buffalo's strength. I would think a defense would want to come up, not play as much zone, and get in these guys' faces, because I don't think these Bills receivers outside of Shakir are really very good at getting away from coverage, right? They don't have great separation in this receiving crew. So I'm kind of surprised by the Miami approach as I look back on it now. And to hear Josh say they might see it again this week is like, you know what? Good. Take advantage of it. It's what you do best anyways.
A couple of more points. I want to bring Cooper up again in just a second, but you just made a point that I want to echo right now. And this is something that Vic Carucci, John Scott, and I discussed on Sports Talk Live this past Monday night in reference to the Keon Coleman wrist injury and the uncertainty surrounding Cooper. You mentioned running backs and tight ends. We all know what the plan was for Dalton Kincaid in this offense. This is the time now as we get past the midway point of the season, and they need answers in the passing game. Yes, running backs, absolutely tight ends on that front.
Absolutely, you're right. And look, Kincaid, I understand that a lot of people think he's doing just fine, and this is the way the offense is. I continue to be underwhelmed. He was supposed to be the number one target in this offense. We all thought that in the offseason, that they moved on from Diggs. They were going to run this offense through Kincaid. I don't have the exact numbers, but I think among all tight ends right now, he's like 21st in yards among tight ends. I'm not talking about everybody. That's among tight ends. He should not be. And I heard an argument that, well, he's actually doing pretty good when you look at other tight ends because it's really close, the yardage. No, I'm sorry. The Bills spent a first-round pick on this guy. He needs to be separating from most of the other tight ends in the NFL. Yeah, I know he's not going to be this new version of Travis Kelce who all of a sudden found his legs the other night, or some of these other guys who are top-notch tight ends. He's a first-round pick. They need to be getting more out of Dalton Kincaid, and I continue to be underwhelmed. I don't care what the metrics say or what the offense is doing. He needs to be a bigger impact player. And what do you have, 5 for 32, I think, last week? Big deal, 5 for 32. Right. I mean, Ray Davis had 1 for 63. That's impact. That's what they need to see from Dalton Kincaid.
Just one more point on Cooper before we move to the defensive side of things. And I listened to Sean McDermott's press conference today, and I think it was Catherine Fitzgerald from the Buffalo News who had asked the question about how Amari Cooper is kind of picking up the playbook and learning the offense and that type of a thing. And I thought, again, I don't want to read too much into it, but I thought McDermott's reaction was interesting. And he's like, well, he's got to practice. We need him to practice. And I guess what I'm getting to, and I understand you've got Indianapolis, then Kansas City, then the bye week, right? But the whole point, or one of the big points for making the move early relative to the trade deadline to get Cooper in there, was to get him up to speed and as impactful as possible within the offense that he is learning, albeit as a veteran during the stretch run of the season. And I'm starting to get the sense from Sean, I just wondered about your reaction to it, that process, he's getting a little impatient with it, that process is stalling, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call it impatient. I think he's disappointed that the guy got hurt in his first game with the Bills. I mean, let's remember, he came in here, I think it was, Tuesday of Tennessee week, so he barely had any time to practice. He went out there. They gave him enough information where he could go out and make 4 catches for 66 yards and a touchdown, so that was nice. But he got hurt in that game, so he didn't practice at all in front of Seattle and missed the game. No, wait a minute. Did he play against? Oh, yeah, he played against Seattle. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. Played against Seattle, minimal impact, 1 catch. That's when he got hurt, was the Seattle game. So after almost not practicing at all against Tennessee, still learning going into Seattle and not really getting the full scope of the offense, then to get hurt and miss all of practice last week, he's been set back. His progress in the offense has definitely been held back because of the injury. And Sean was basically saying, I can't evaluate how far along he is in his comprehension of the offense because he's not practicing. And, you could study a playbook all you want, but you got to go out on the field and implement what you learned on the field. And he hasn't been able to do it. So I don't know what they did today with him. Again, it was a walkthrough. I guess we'll know more Thursday, Friday when they have actual practices to see if he can get out there and do something. But, yeah, I can imagine Sean is a little frustrated because, this was a guy that they were counting on to get their passing game turned back around.
And with the uncertainty with Keon Coleman, obviously it compounds that level of concern. Let's switch gears because there is concern on the defensive side as well. With Dewan Smoot now on IR with the wrist injury, needing surgery, Dwayne Carter as well. So the defensive line is a concern, right? So they go out in a couple of blasts from the pass here, and they pick up Jordan Phillips and Quentin Jefferson. What are you shaking your head? I mean, give me your take on each of those guys.
Look, I mean, I think Quentin Jefferson, that's an okay move. They didn't have to give up anything because, well, neither one of these guys, they were both cut, so they're just free agent signings. They didn't give up any assets. Quentin Jefferson, I understand. It's a guy who was here for the 1 year, 2020, and he basically is what Smoot is. He can line up on the edge, but on third down, they can bring him on the inside, meaning they can have Miller and Rousseau be the edge rushers. So he does a lot of what Smoot has been able to do for the Bills. So I understood that one. Plus, this is a guy who played for the Jets last year, and he did have some production. I think he had 6 sacks for them last season. The Bills also got a firsthand look at him twice. So they had good information on him. Now, he hadn't done much in Cleveland. I think he played 5 games and was a healthy scratch for 4. So clearly, he's 31. He's in decline. But that move I could at least make an argument for because of the usage that they could get out of him. Jordan Phillips, Adam, I don't understand what they're doing. He was among the worst defensive players on this team last year. If you believe in Pro Football Focus, they graded 38 players in 2023. He was the 37th rank on the only AJ Klein was below him. And again, I know PFF grades, say what you will about him. I always say that. And then I just say there's context, though, because they are studying every play. I don't know what their level of knowledge is, but it does provide a little bit of context that you can utilize. And if you watched him play last year, you and I could say that too. He was useless. Now he goes to the Giants. They saw nothing. They traded him to the Cowboys in the training camp period. Goes there. He played 2 games. He's been, I don't know if he was hurt, but he only played in 2 games. And even in those 2 games, again, going to PFF, he was their worst defensive player, literally their worst player. So what are the Bills doing here? I don't get that move. I asked Sean point blank today. I said to him, Sean, look, Ilianku got called up from the practice squad the last 2 weeks. And when you watch him play, he actually did okay. And he was taking about 30% of the snaps. At least he did in the game against Miami. He actually made some plays. He looks like he belongs. He's a stout guy. That's what you need in the middle of the line. Why not just elevate him full-time to the 53-man? What are you bringing back Jordan Phillips for? And he didn't really answer that. He acknowledged that Anku has played well, but he really didn't explain why they don't just make that move and bring him up. I suspect that Phillips is a veteran. He weighs 330 pounds. They're going to see what he can do. And then they've always got Anku in their back pocket on the practice squad. He has 1 elevation left. If Jordan Phillips totally bombs out here, they could always cut him and then maybe bring in Anku. But if it was me, Adam, I wouldn't have wasted any time or money on Phillips. I would have brought Ilianku up. They still have Branson Dean on the practice squad, so you still have some depth. And you can always sign a guy to the practice squad if you're really worried. I didn't get the Phillips signing at all. I could be wrong, but I don't see that helping them one bit.
Well, I know that Sean, familiarity is something he likes, right?
Yeah.
Players that know the defense. He knows the player that he's bringing in. That goes both ways. How much do you get the sense that played a role here?
Oh, absolutely. And somebody else, I think John Scott asked him about it. How much does that factor into your decisions? And he said, sure. I mean, we like to have guys that we know, we have a history with them. We know he knows the defense. There won't be a big change there. So I get all that. But really, go back to my point, Adam. Ilianku's been here for 2.5 years. He knows the defense too. Why not just stick with him? He's, 26, 27, whatever he is, younger player than Jordan Phillips. Hey, whatever. They know more than me, Adam, but this was a move that I scoffed at yesterday, and I continue to scoff at it today.
So you factor all that in, and you and I had talked about needs on this defense. Defensive line is an obvious one. You could make a case at linebacker and certainly safety as well. Couple all of that with the lack of activity for them at the trade deadline. Did that surprise you?
It didn't really surprise me. No, they made their move. The Amari Cooper move was essentially their trade deadline move, and they made it 3 weeks early. So good for them. I really wasn't expecting them to do much of anything. In fact, when I saw Quentin Jefferson get released, I even wrote that in my blog yesterday. I said, well, here's a guy that's on the move. Is this a possibility? And then sure enough, they made the move this morning. So I was right on that one. Jordan Phillips never crossed my mind. I saw that he got released, and I didn't even think about that because I figured there's no way they're going to go back for a third time with him. That happened. But no, I didn't expect them to make a move. The only move I truly expected, was cutting Mike Edwards. And then putting Smoot on IR gave them 2 roster spots to play with. And when they cut Edwards, my first thought was, okay, maybe they're going to make the call to Micah Hyde now. They didn't do it, and maybe that's not going to happen. Maybe they're happy enough with the way DeMar Hamlin has played that they're going to roll with him. He has been a little bit better. I've been a little bit hard on Hamlin because I just think that he was like the best option they had with Edwards flaming out and Bishop not being ready. But I think he actually has played better the last few weeks. So I think they're feeling pretty good about Rapp and Hamlin. And then, they've still got Cole Bishop, and they've always got Cam Lewis, right? The Swiss Army knife who always is there in a pinch. So I guess for now they're going to roll with those 2, but I'm not ruling out the Hyde thing. I still believe maybe it's, next week when they play the Chiefs. Before that, he's not going to play against the Chiefs, but the bye week is coming. that's the time to do it. If they're going to do it,
Yeah.
you've got the bye week to get them up and running. So we'll see. I'm not closing the door yet, but I did kind of think that maybe yesterday was the day to do it, and they didn't do it.
So as far as the defensive line is concerned, we're having this discussion in the context of the run defense, right? In Miami, that was a thing that was glaring for me this past Sunday, was Miami running the ball very impactfully, 149 yards rushing for the Dolphins in that game. So in light of the injuries and some of the changes we've talked about, how much I have a concern about this run defense at this stage of the season.
Now, the thing is, and Karen Johnson sort of admitted this the other day, which was a little bit funny, and I put it in my story. He kind of said against the Dolphins, they were actually okay about letting them run because they just don't want to get burned by Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. And if you look back, their approach against Miami has worked. They have held those guys in check almost every time. So I guess it works. Now, it doesn't explain Derrick Henry getting 200 yards against him, and it doesn't explain, the Cardinals ran well against him in week 1. There have been some times where they just haven't been good. But I think, Adam, it's going to be Sean McDermott's philosophy. He does not want to give up big plays. For 8 years now, they have been great at limiting the explosives. They will live with you gouging them once in a while because they believe eventually they are going to bend, but they're not going to break in the red zone, and they're going to stop teams from scoring touchdowns. So run between the 20s all you want, but eventually we're going to catch up to you and stop it. With all this light box that they use, they're going to get run on, right? I mean, they rarely have more than 6 in the box. I mean, you count Taron Johnson as 7, but he's generally in coverage, right? So they're going to be attacking this way. Teams should run against the Bills. The big point is going to be if they move the ball on the ground, there's got to be a point in that possession where the Bills rise up and stop them. And we can't argue. They've done a pretty good job of that.
Yeah, they really have. And looking ahead briefly here, we'll get more into the matchup with the Colts on Friday. They do have the ability to run the football, but the Indianapolis offense at this point seemed to be in reverse against the Vikings the other night. And Joe Flacco, I mean, that whole quarterback situation and that decision is a source of a great deal of controversy. I mean, I'm not all that concerned as far as a matchup with the Indianapolis Colts from a defensive perspective.
Yeah, I mean, look, Anthony Richardson was horrible. I mean, there's just horrible quarterback play from that guy. And I understand he's your number 4 overall pick from 23. You're kind of hoping he's your future and you need to develop him. But look, they're in the mix
right.
for a playoff spot. And you don't want to just bag the season because you're trying to develop a guy who really has not proven he can play yet. So I understand both schools of thought there. Maybe the Colts, who probably aren't going to win the Super Bowl, maybe you just go with Anthony Richardson and live with it, even though you're close to a playoff berth. Maybe you punt this season. I see that side of it too. But you know how these coaches and general managers are, Adam. They don't want to do that. They don't ever want to admit that they're taking a step back to not make a playoff run when they're sitting there, in the hunt. They're a game out of the 7th spot. So you bring in Flacco because you think you have a chance with him. So I get it. I do understand. And I would have to say I would go that route. I would go with Joe Flacco and try to get some wins. That division, I mean, they've lost twice to the Texans, so they're 2 games back, but they're screwed on the tiebreaker, obviously. So they're probably not winning the division. But they, if they get on a little run here, they've got a very good defense, I think. Yep. They could make some noise and get a wild card berth. And that's what you're in this for. Adam, I'm sorry. You're in it to get to the playoffs. That's what most teams are shooting for.
Well, that's it.
I understand that.
I think you owe it to yourself and the locker room that if you're in position, you lose players that way. Players will check out. And once that happens, then it's a downward spiral. So I get it. From there at 4-5, like you said, in the fight, and you have to do everything you possibly can. You owe it to your organization and to the players on your roster. Career windows are very short, obviously. And if you've got a shot at you want to lose a team in a hurry, punt on the season. And, that can have long-lasting, effects beyond just the season we're talking about here.
I mean, they've got a tough game with the Bills. I don't have their schedule in front of me. But if they were to lose like the next 2 or so, and they're 4-7 and their chances are not looking great, then you go back to Richardson. You forget about Joe Flacco. You gave it a try for 3 weeks here. Then go back to him and hope that, he starts learning and you can go into next season with something. But right now, Joe Flacco is their best bet. And we were talking, a couple of us a little while ago, Joe Flacco is going to give the Colts a chance to win this game. I mean, to me, I don't think it's going to be an easy game. The Colts have a pretty good defense. They'll give the Bills some trouble. And if Joe Flacco, last week was a bad matchup for Flacco. The Vikings blitz more than any team in the league. And he's not mobile. He can't get away from it. He was under siege, but the Bills don't do that. The Bills do not blitz, and we've just talked about their defensive line. I don't think their pass rush has been nearly good enough for the Bills. I understand they usually only do it with 4, so your numbers are going to be a little bit lower. But I think Flacco is going to have an opportunity this week to get in the pocket and stand and throw. And when you look at his receivers, he's got some guys who can play. Pittman's a very good receiver. Josh Downs is terrific in the slot, and Alec Pierce is a little bit dangerous on the outside. He's got some weapons. So if they can get in a rhythm with him, I think Flacco definitely will give the Colts an opportunity to win this game, certainly more than Anthony Richardson would have.
Well, I think the Bills are also familiar with what Jonathan Taylor can do, right?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if they get him going and they get some balance, if the Bills are going to be facing a two-dimensional team, again, I think the Colts could be a problem. This is one of these games, and I am never going to say that the Bills are looking ahead to the Chiefs because they're not. No team in the NFL, that's such a line of bullshit, Adam, when media and fans start talking about trap game and nobody's looking ahead to the Chiefs. They know what's in front of them. And I think that the Colts are going to give them a tough game. And I would not be surprised if this is the week where the Bills, may not play quite their best and they could lose. Am I saying they're going to lose? No, but I think with Joe Flacco, there's definitely a chance of that happening.
Yeah, I don't think they lose this game. But to your point, I think you're right. It's week to week, 17-game season. And in particular, the Bills under Sean McDermott aren't a team that's going to look past anybody. Right?
They don't. He keeps them in the week, in the moment. That's been one of his strengths, I think, throughout his career.
All right. So looking ahead to Friday's show, I was just texting this morning. Andre Reed, the Hall of Fame receiver, has agreed to join us. So,
nice.
I think he's got a lot going on in terms of his foundation. There's a Bills Mafia documentary. We're going to talk to him about all those things. But I think he'll bring some particular insight into the receiving situation. We'll know more then about how things are shaping up offensively with who's playing and who might not be. I think Andre is going to be able to give some pretty good insight. He's been strong when we've had him on Sports Talk Live, don't you think?
Well, good. I hope he's going to talk to me because, he's always mad at me, it seems like.
He and I had a few dust-ups over the years. Do you have – what's that history like with you?
We had some dust-ups. We've been good. We've been good. Well, since he made the Hall of Fame, too, we've been good. I wrote very positive things about him. But, look, I liked Andre when he was a player. He told it like it is, and if you wrote something he didn't like, he got in your face, that was fine. So, yeah, I'm good with Andre. I'll be looking forward to talking to him.
Well, I think I'd like to reflect a little bit with him on what those days were like, because I think you would agree with me, and I was around for him. I was working in Syracuse, but for the home games, I was in there. That locker room with Jim, Andre, Thurman, Bruce, like it was a completely different situation back then. Now it's much more kind of buttoned up, almost corporate in some respects. I mean, that back then, the emotions – the verbal shots, I mean, they were flying. And that was pretty intense post-game depending upon how things went in those rooms. And Andre was kind of at the middle of some of that.
That's the biggest difference between then and now. I mean, now everything is just so vanilla. You go in that locker room, Adam, I don't get hardly anything that's really interesting. It's just a bunch of blah, blah, blah. But back then you could talk to guys honestly. And also back then too, if the team stayed the same for a long time. This is before free agency. So you got to have relationships with these guys. And today I hardly have any relationships with. I haven't had a true relationship with a guy probably since Kyle Williams walked out the door, because these guys just come and go. They don't care about you. It's all they care about is their own social media. So it's a totally different atmosphere, media to player today than it was back then. I mean, we see Andre out the big tree and we'd be getting into it, talking smack at the big tree with him over there. So that'll be good to catch up with Andre. I hope you all can listen to that one.
Yeah, I remember Thurman Thomas would answer, and because I was really young too and just kind of starting out, he would kind of answer my questions with a question back. If Thurman didn't like it, boy, I mean,
Yeah.
he taught you, between Jim Boeheim and Thurman Thomas, it kind of helped me develop early on. It was some tough sledding from time to time with these guys.
You bring up Thurman. I wrote a story today in my 3 questions looking ahead, but I led it with, Tyler Bass and how, he really rose to the occasion in that moment last week. And I led my story with the famous line from Thurman, which is one of the funniest ones I ever heard. So I'll recap real quick. So Norwood misses the kick in the Super Bowl in January '91. 10 months later, they're in Los Angeles playing the Raiders. Norwood had one of the worst days you could ever imagine. He missed 3 field goals and an extra point in the second half of the game against the Raiders. And the last one, he makes the extra point. They tie the game with a minute to go. He makes the extra point. Nate Odoms makes an interception. They get the ball back going for the win, and he misses his 3rd field goal of the half. So they have to go to overtime. They get there, and he ends up kicking the game winner from 42 yards. So in the locker room, we're talking to Thurman, and he goes, "Yeah, man, if he'd have missed that one, we'd have thrown him out of the plane over Minnesota," or whatever he said. It was so funny. And so I said, I don't think anybody's threatened to throw Tyler Bass out of a plane, but good for him that he rose to the occasion. But it was so funny. But that's what you got in the locker room back then, were comments like that, from the heart. They didn't care. It was great. It was so much different.
Absolutely. Speaking of differences between then and now, can you imagine that group with social media?
Oh my God!
It would be.
Can you imagine that group on social media in Super Bowl week 1990 when they're going to Mons Venus and wherever else they were going? Can you imagine social media back then? Oh,
right.
Smokes.
It was bad enough with that crew, off the field from that perspective and the partying and all that. You add social media to that mix. My goodness. All right. We've taken our time here on Believe in Bills. Thank you so much, as always, for joining us. Sal Mayorana, Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. I'm Adam Benini, WGRZ TV, Sports Talk Live, Buffalo, and we will be back with you with Andre. Fresh news as of this afternoon. He's agreed to it. Look forward to that Friday on Believe in Bills as we look forward to the matchup with the 4-5 Indianapolis Colts. Thanks for being with us here on Believe in Bills.